Chapter 10:26, Two Restrictions. Upon seeing the young man in the black trench coat appear with a black revolver in hand, Conas Kilgore, who was no stranger to all the important figures in the world, immediately responded. The thumb on his left hand that held the iron-skinned pocket watch was rapidly moving, reaching for one of the metal buttons on the messy inlays of the pocket watch. He suddenly raised his right arm, aiming at Jayaman Sparrow with the 6 gray gun barrels that formed a circle. This process was like a fleeting spark that quickly came to an end. As for Conas Kilgore's left thumb, it had pressed down. He overcame his instinct and didn't directly use restriction from the concerto of light and shadow. This was because he didn't know Jayaman Sparrow well enough, unsure as to what he was best at. Furthermore, the person with Jayaman Sparrow's appearance might not be Jayaman Sparrow. Blindly using restriction would only be a waste of an opportunity. He intended to observe and wait for a while longer before he came up with a more specific order to distort the laws. Bang, 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 bang. The strange revolver let out a roar of despair and spewed out a storm of black and icy bullets, instantly enveloping the enemy beneath the crimson moon. At this moment, Jayaman Sparrow's figure turned transparent and incorporeal. At the same time, the bullets tore through the target in the black trench coat, tearing apart the afterimage he left behind. And behind Conas Kilgore, Jayaman Sparrow, with a cold expression, quickly appeared. His body was half-crouched, and he was leaning forward. The black top hat on his head appeared blood-red under the crimson moon's illumination. He suddenly raised the black-barreled revolver in his hand, opening his mouth slightly while aiming and squeezing the trigger. Bang! The floorboard to the right of Conas Kilgore exploded into countless fragments. Jayaman Sparrow's shot had been ridiculously far off the mark. Furthermore, its destructive power was clearly lacking. This was the distortion power of an Earl of the Fallen. It caused the bullet's trajectory to deviate and have its power weakened. Seizing this opportunity, Conas Kilgore used disorder to influence measurement standards, arriving above the balcony of the bedroom with one step. Then he half-turned his body, and with a smack, he pressed one of the metal buttons on his iron-skinned pocket watch. He then solemnly said, "Teleportation is prohibited here." Silently, Mager Manor, which was being illuminated by the gigantic crimson moon, experienced an unknown change. Jayaman Sparrow, whose body had rapidly turned faint after firing, appeared out of the void again. He had failed to successfully change positions. Concerto of light and shadow, restriction. To Conas Kilgore, no matter what Jayaman Sparrow was good at, he had to immediately restrict his obvious ability to teleport. An enemy who could do close-quarters teleportation at a high frequency wasn't only irritating, but also dangerous. Realizing that his teleportation had failed, Jayaman Sparrow's expression remained unperturbed. His body quickly warped as the colors faded from his body, leaving a deep darkness. This deep darkness suddenly collapsed across the ground, fusing with the shadows in the region where the moonlight couldn't reach, making him indistinguishable. Bang, 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 bang. Bullet holes riddled the spot where Jayaman Sparrow was previously standing, tearing the ground open. Boom! The area collapsed immediately, revealing the room before. However, no dust was thrown up. And despite such a stir, Mager Manor remained blanketed in deep shadows. No one was awakened or gave a response. Conas Kilgore suppressed the urge to restrict the action of hiding in the shadows. Holding onto Revere's shout of despair and concerto of light and shadow, he calmly observed his surroundings and waited for Jayaman Sparrow to appear once again before launching his attack. However, inside the collapsed room, the shadows were silent and there wasn't any movement. And outside the window, the steeple and chimneys remained immersed in an icy cold darkness. The gigantic crimson moon seemed to be hanging over the roof. The plants in the garden, the grapevines far away, and all the various classical windows seemed to degenerate into the background on this night. Despite being visible to the naked eye, they were imperturbable. All of Mager Manor was cold, dark, and silent, just like a forgotten corner that didn't garner the attention or incur discovery from others. There were no signs of life at all. As a demigod, As an important figure in the intelligence community, Konas Kilgore quickly had a theory. He suspected that the person was related to the authority of concealment. This gave him many ideas, but Jayamon Sparrow remained nowhere to be seen. He actually didn't sneak attack and even gave up the chance to deliver a barrage of attacks, leaving me so many openings. Doesn't he know that a high-sequence lawyer or arbiter is very difficult to deal with once they're prepared prior to the battle? A sense of puzzlement flashed across Konas Kilgore's mind. Using his observations of his surroundings and the relatively non-urgent situation, he quickly understood his current predicament. He knew that defeating Jayamon Sparrow wasn't key, but escaping the concealed world was. If he couldn't leave this place, there might be more dangers awaiting him. As long as I can leave this dark-styled Mager Manor, even if angels were to descend, I don't have to worry since I'm in Backland. Such artificial concealed worlds must have an opening. This is a law that cannot be avoided in the mysterious world. The usage and distortion of laws was what lawyer pathway demigods were best at. Konas Kilgore had many ideas come to him as he quickly made a decision. He suddenly turned around and jumped from the balcony, flying off like he was a spring that was released. This demigod of the military instantly reached a high altitude, but he didn't slow down or show any signs of falling. He maintained this speed as he went higher and higher in altitude, thus achieving flight. Earl of the Fallen exploit. This was the exploitation of laws. By extending the jumping process, he could maintain a much longer duration. If Konas Kilgore became a Sequence 2 angel, he could even jump onto the Crimson Moon with this beyonder power. While jumping in midair, Konas Kilgore swung his right arm and released his disorder beyonder power. He wanted to create a certain level of disorder in Mager Manor in this strange world. The true exit would then be exposed through the generated ripples. Instantly, the flowers and grapevines in the background of Mager Manor wavered. The black steeple, chimneys, and classical windows were covered in a faint shadow. In the entire world, only the gigantic crimson moon, which appeared to be right before them, didn't change. It continued hanging silently in the sky. That's the exit. Konas Kilgore grasped the patterns from the disorder, and using some actual feedback, he determined where the exit was. Without any hesitation, he exerted strength in his waist and used Magnify to forcefully change his direction, allowing him to rush towards the bright red moon. At that moment, a figure appeared in front of Mager Manor. It was none other than the cold-looking Jayamon Sparrow, who wore a black trench coat and half-top hat. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind appeared out of nowhere, sweeping Jayamon Sparrow upwards as he chased after Konas Kilgore. Amidst the wind, he raised the iron-black revolver in his right hand and pulled the trigger. Bang! A bullet flew out, exploding into countless fragments. They then turned into a storm that swept towards Konas Kilgore. Death knell slaughter, it was a barrage of attacks. Almost at the same time, Konas Kilgore changed direction without any warning, plummeting instead of rushing towards the moon. As a result, he dodged the bullet storm's assault as though he was prepared for it. No, it wasn't the case. He was prepared. Although his main goal was to escape the changed Mager Manor, he was still worried that Jayamon Sparrow would seize the opportunity to attack him. Therefore, he came up with a simple trap, planning to use his escape as bait to fish out the hiding Jayamon Sparrow. He could then take the initiative to heavily injure his opponent. Halfway down, Konas Kilgore's figure suddenly bounced back, having distorted the direction he was heading in. This time, his destination was the next point, where Jayamon Sparrow was flying towards. Right on the heels of that, he yanked his pocket watch-wielding left hand back and grabbed Jayamon Sparrow through thin air, pulling him from a distance of nearly 100 meters away to just inches before him. Earl of the Fallen Magnify. Whoosh! Amidst the howling winds, Konas Kilgore grabbed Jayamon Sparrow's clothes and pressed his strange revolver in his right hand forward. Bangs, bang, bang, bangs, bang. Revere's shout of despair released countless bullets like a machine gun, instantly tearing Jayamon Sparrow's body into fluttering pieces of paper. Konas Kilgore's gaze froze slightly as he immediately moved his left finger and pressed one of the metal buttons on his pocket watch. With a click, this Earl of the Fallen didn't hesitate to say in a domineering fashion, "Stand-ins are prohibited here." Just as he said that, the howling wind came to a stop. Mager Manor returned to silence once again as it was blanketed by dark shadows. Kona's Kilgore changed direction and began spiraling in midair in search of Jayam and Sparrow. However, there weren't any anomalies in the dark night sky. This Earl of the Fallen hesitated for a moment before preparing to continue rushing towards the gigantic crimson moon. At this moment, figures appeared in the garden, vineyard, and manor's main building. They either grew or became taller, rapidly taking form. They all had black hair and brown eyes with sharp facial features. They wore silk top hats and black trench coats. They were all Jayam sparrows. The only difference was that some of them were of normal build, some with their backs sunk inwards. The rest were bloated, while others just a thin layer. Upon seeing this scene, Kona's Kilgore immediately recalled a dangerous enemy he had once encountered. One of the leaders of Inti's intelligence department, a bizarre sorcerer.